road had been long and winding for L. Frank Baum, and yet he found himself returning again and again to his Oz series. Though some could argue this was mainly for the purpose of the financial gain to be found in doing that, Baum also felt a great sense of obligation to his fans and children everywhere who had come to love his storyland. I'm Cody Goggin, and welcome to our final chapter on the story of Baum and his writing of the Oz stories. Welcome to the Royal Historian of Oz. The failure of the Oz Film Company had taken a toll on Baum's health, but his determination to write never wavered, and he continued an output of one Oz book a year. The 11th in the fabled series would be The Lost Princess of Oz, and it would be released on June 5th, 1917. Frank had received a letter from a fan that had suggested that if Ozma had gotten lost or hurt, everybody in Oz would be sad. For Baum, it inspired an entire book. He would dedicate this novel to his newborn granddaughter, named for his character, Ozma. Dorothy Gale has risen from bed and joined her friends in the Emerald City, but finds that Ozma has not joined them. Indeed, Ozma has not risen from bed yet, so Dorothy goes to check on her. Within Ozma's chambers, Dorothy finds that the Princess of Oz has gone missing. Meanwhile, Glinda awakens in the Quadling country to find that her book of records and all of her magical tools have gone missing as well. She sends a messenger to the Emerald City to relay her predicament, and the wizard decides to send her some of his magic tools to aid her. But when he goes to find them, he finds that his tools are also missing. Glinda, Dorothy, and the wizard arrange a group of search parties to find the princess and the missing magic. Button-Bright, Trot, and Betsy Bobbin all join them. At the same time, in Winky Country, Cake the Cookie Cook has lost her magical golden dishpan. It's been stolen, and a character named Frogman offers to help her find it. In the unknown communities of Thee and Herku, Dorothy and her crew enter the Peachtree Garden, and Button-Bright eats from the trees. He discovers inside the peach is a golden center, and he keeps the gold to show Dorothy later. The people there warn the peaches have been enchanted with evil by Ugu the shoemaker. In the land of Herku, they discover that the people of Herku have become strong enough to keep giants as slaves, and that Ugu the shoemaker was once a resident of the village. Now he has moved into the mountains and lives within a castle. Dorothy begins to suspect that the great magic that Ugu has built up for himself may be from having stolen it from Glinda and the wizard. So they head to the mountain castle of Ugu, and on the way meet up with Cake and the Frogman. The parties combine and meet the Little Pink Bear, a wind-up toy. The Little Pink Bear can answer any question it is asked. After arriving at the castle, when Button-Bright falls into a pit, the crew asks the Little Pink Bear where Ozma is. It says that Ozma and Button-Bright have both fallen into the pit below. They rescue Button-Bright, and the bear says that Ozma is there among them too, but they just don't see her. Without knowing quite what to do, they advance toward Ugu and work through magical defense spells that were surely stolen from Glinda and the wizard. As they arrive before Ugu, he sets a spell that makes the room spin terribly and makes an attempt to escape. But Dorothy uses her magic belt to set the room back to normal and turns Ugu into a simple dove. But using his own magic, he remains the size of a human and as an oversized dove, he uses the golden dishpan to escape the Quadling country. Dorothy and the group regain the magical items, and the little pink bear reveals that Ozma is within the small piece of gold that came from the peach, eaten by Button-Bright. And so they split it open and free her from her trap. She reveals that she had been imprisoned by Ugu after discovering him while he was stealing the magical items. A few days later, Ugu flies to the Emerald City and begs Dorothy to forgive him for his wrongdoings, and she forgives him. Given the choice to be turned back to a human, Ugu decides he likes being a dove. And the people of the Emerald City celebrate the return of Ozma to the throne. The book was well received. With Baum's health in continuing decline, he was unable to meet the requirements of his publisher to write another Mary Louise book. So, the next Edith Van Dyne novel, Mary Louise Solves a Mystery, would actually be ghostwritten by Baum's son, Harry. Frank, on the other hand, would begin the next Oz story. The Ten Woodmen of Oz begins with the Ten Woodmen and the Scarecrow sharing stories with each other in the Woodman's Palace, when suddenly a boy named Woot wanders in. They feed him and give him a place to rest, and afterward Woot asks the Ten Woodmen how it came to be that he was made of tin. He explains that once he had been in love with the ward of the Wicked Witch, a girl named Nimmy. Because of this, the Wicked Witch of the East cast a spell that made the Woodman chop off each of his body parts, one by one. And since no one in Oz can die, he survived, and each part was replaced with tin by a kindly nearby tinsmith. But since the Woodman no longer had a heart, he no longer felt in love with his beloved Nimmy, and he left her. He explains to Woot that he later rusted in the forest and was rescued by Dorothy and the Scarecrow and given a heart by the wizard. But Woot says that the heart has only made him kind, not loving, because a person in love would have sought out Nimmy to return to her. The Tin Woodman feels ashamed and decides to go all the way to Munchkin Country to seek her out. Together with Woot and the Scarecrow, the Woodman runs into the Loons of Loonville, who are inflatable balloons. The gang escapes the balloons by popping several of them and descend into the Yoop Valley, where they run into the female giant, Mrs. Yoop. Mrs. Yoop has transformed Polychrome, the Rainbow's daughter, into an animal for fun, and she soon does the same to the travelers. Woot, however, manages to steal a magic apron that can open doors and passageways. This enables them to escape, but they remain in their animal form. The group invades an encounter with a jaguar and escape from a den of dragons to emerge into a farm owned by Ginger. General Ginger sends to the Emerald City for help, and Dorothy arrives with Ozma to turn everyone back to their human forms. However, Ozma realizes that Woot's form of a green monkey cannot be gotten rid of without making someone else assume the form instead. So, they turn Mrs. Yoop into the monkey as punishment for her crimes, and Woot is restored. They then continue their quest to find the Ten Woodmen's lost love and come to the place where the Woodman had originally rusted in the first Oz book. They find that another Tin Man has rusted in the very same spot, and upon oiling him up, he tells them that his name is Captain Fighter, and he too had been in love with Nimmy. The witch had forced the same fate upon him as the Tin Woodman, and he too was without a heart. But unlike the Woodman, Captain Fighter did not really miss having his heart. The two tin men agree to find Nimmy together and let her decide who she wants to be with. Later, they come to the home of the tinsmith, and the Ten Woodman speaks to his own previous head. After that, they continue through the invisible land and stay with a group of pigs before finally coming to the foot of Mount Munch. A rabbit informs them that Nimmy lives in a cottage at the peak of the mountain, and there they find her, married to the former assistant of the tinsmith. She refuses Captain Fighter and the Ten Woodmen and asks that they leave her alone forever. Sadly, everyone departs home, and the Scarecrow and the Ten Woodmen return to the Woodman's palace together, as the book began. This book was released on May 13th, 1918, and of course featured artwork by John R. Neal, and it was a considerable success. Sales of Baum's books increased across the board over what they had been over the last several years, and even his non-Oz books were selling more than they had before. Baum was reported to have earned $6,742.52 from his Oz books that year. In an effort to continue meeting deadlines while his health continued to decline, Baum found himself working on fragments of separate Oz books going forward, building more than one story at a time. The 13th book set in Oz would become The Magic of Oz, and tells of a Munchkin boy who plots with the Gnome King to overtake the land of Oz. At the top of Mount Munch lives a Munchkin named Beanie Aru, who has discovered a way of transforming people and objects by using a strange magic word. But since Ozma has decreed that no one in Oz is allowed to practice magic besides the wizard and Glinda, the Good Witch, Beanie writes down his magic word and hides it within his lab. When Beanie and his wife later attend a fair, their son Kiki Aru discovers the paper and uses the magic word to transform himself into a hawk. He then explores the lands of Oz from the sky, and he ends up in the lands of Ev, where he learns that in Ev, you must have money to pay for a night's stay. So he transforms himself into a magpie in order to steal some money. Kiki is confronted for his theft and says that he never knew how it felt to be wicked before, but now that he does, he likes it. The former Gnome King overhears this and decides to use Kiki as a way to restore himself to power within Oz. He befriends Kiki Aru, and then they transform themselves into birds in order to fly over the deadly desert into the land of Oz. There, they disguise themselves as animals to evade the watchful eye of Glinda and to begin building an army of animal wildlife. They begin recruiting, but while in the forest of Goo Goo, they accidentally run into Dorothy the Wizard, the Cowardly Lion, and the Hungry Tiger. The Gnome King sees his old enemies and orders Kiki Aru to turn them into other things immediately. But Kiki decides to turn on the Gnome King and turns him into a goose, along with all the others. The Gnome King greatly fears being a goose, because should he lay an egg, the egg would be poisonous to him, as they are to all gnomes. Kiki goes into the forest and begins transforming monkeys into giant soldiers. But he makes them so big that they cannot move through the trees. While he is doing this, the wizard overhears how to say the magic word, and quickly uses it to turn Kiki and the Gnome King into a walnut and a hickory nut. He then reverts himself and the others back to their normal states. The group then go on another adventure where Captain Bill and Trot have escaped from an enchanted island, and they've been trying to get a flower for Ozma's birthday. They struggle to obtain the flower and just narrowly arrive in time to celebrate with Ozma in the Emerald City. Finally, they change Kiki, Aru, and the Gnome King back to their normal bodies, and make them both drink the water of oblivion, which wipes their memories. They are then kept in the Emerald City to be taught how to be good and how to be kind. It would go on to become an even bigger success than the previous Oz book. But unfortunately, that success would be bittersweet. L. Frank Baum suffered a stroke on May the 5th, 1919. His health had been fragile since childhood, even if rumors of a youthful heart attack may have been exaggerated. His years working and writing to meet deadlines and to pay his family's debts had taken a toll on Frank. He slipped into a coma that night and only briefly awoke once to tell his beloved wife Maud, "Now we can cross the shifting sands." L. Frank Baum passed away on May 6, 1919, and the news would devastate children and fans across the world. The Magic of Oz would be released posthumously 1 month after his death, and would become one of the biggest successes of his recent career. Sales of his books again began to climb, and Baum's imagination thrilled readers even after his death. Indeed, Frank had even left behind one more surprise for his fans. One final adventure to the land of Oz. Glinda of Oz would be released 1 year after the author's death in July of 1920. Dedicated to Frank's son and with artwork lovingly provided again by John R. Neal, the book would be a gift to readers who were mourning the loss of their author. From the Great Book of Records, it is learned that the Flatheads and the Skeezers have gone to war. Ozma and Dorothy swiftly decide to put a stop to this. The two warring tribes live near Oogaboo in the Deadly Desert, and they number 100 Flatheads to 101 Skeezers. Not much else is known about them other than they both practice sorts of magic. On their way north, Ozma and Dorothy are captured and must escape from a group of large purple spiders. When they finally arrive, they find that the Flatheads have actual heads that are flat, and they carry their brains in their pockets. Their leader is known as the Sue Dick, and he gains power by stealing brains from people. The Sue Dick has gone to war with the Skeezers because they will not allow the Flatheads to fish in their lake, and they have turned the Sue Dick's wife into a golden pig. When Dorothy and Ozma realize the Sue Dick is not friendly, they flee by turning themselves invisible. The Skeezers live in a glass-domed city under a nearby lake and are ruled by their queen, Coo-ee-oh. When Dorothy and Ozma arrive, the queen draws up the drawbridge and the girls are stranded there. They befriend the queen's chambermaid, Lady Oryx, who tells them that the queen learned her magic from 3 adepts and then turned them all to fish. Now, she uses that power to spy on her citizens and to punish them. The next day, Coo-ee-oh leads her soldiers and boats to begin fighting with the Flatheads. But the Sue Dick turns Coo-ee-oh into a swan. As a swan, she is so taken by her own beauty that she forgets that she is at war. The Sue Dick is so amused by this that he accidentally spills and wastes the poison he had intended to use on the lake. He leaves, and the war stands at a stalemate. Ozma calls Glinda for help with a magic ring since things are beginning to get out of hand. Glinda is joined by most of the notable people of Oz, including the Wizard, the Scarecrow, the Tin Woodman, the Patchwork Girl, the Cowardly Lion, Tick-Tock, Jack Pumpkinhead, Professor Wogglebug, the Shaggy Man, Uncle Henry, Captain Bill, Betsy Bobbin, Trot, Ojo, and Button-Bright. Together, they all head to the land of the Skeezers. The 3 adepts that had trained Coo-ee-oh go and find a way to return themselves to their normal form through the magic of a powerful witch named Rira the Red. Glinda and the party arrive, but are at first not successful. With Dorothy on the inside, though, and Glinda on the outside, they navigate the magic spells of Coo-ee-oh and bring the sunken city back to the surface. A new queen is assigned to the Skeevers, and the Su-Dick is forced to return the brains he had stolen, which in turn leaves him powerless and harmless. Glinda then enchants the Flatheads so that their heads will grow to cover their brains. They then join the Skeevers in pledging their allegiances to Ozma and the Emerald City. On the day that Baum died, his lifelong love, Maud, wrote a letter to family and explained her pain. She wrote, "He told me many times I was the only one he had ever loved. He hated to die, did not want to leave me, said he was never happy without me. But it was better that he should go first, if it had to be, for I doubt if he could have got along without me. It is all so sad, and I am so forlorn and alone. For nearly 37 years, we had been everything to each other. We were happy, and now I am alone to face the world alone." With the release of Glinda of Oz, Baum's final contributions to the Land of Oz were published. His life and imagination had been spent creating this wonderful world of colorful characters for readers to enjoy and children to dream about. But his passing would not mark the end of the Oz story. In fact, far from it. Maud would go on to see the world of Oz developed into its most famous form, the MGM film starring Judy Garland, with whom Maud had dinner. Though Baum's son had desired to continue writing new books in the Oz series, Maud would eventually handpick Ruth Plumley Thompson to continue her husband's lifelong work. With this decision, new children would always have a new adventure in Oz to enjoy. And over the next 75 years, many different writers and adaptations of Oz would have their chance to adventure within Baum's imagination. Because of this, L. Frank Baum continues to live on over 100 years after the first publication of The Wonderful Wizard of Oz. His life and legacy is of colorful characters and marvelous lands that have thrilled readers for generations and will continue to always remind us that there is no place like home. I'm Cody Goggin, and I thank you for going on this adventure with me. This has been the Royal Historian of Oz.